Hey, what's going on, everybody? Andrew here, back for our build review show. It is Monday, November 11th of 2024. And on this show, I bring users builds up live on stream, giving them personalized feedback and advice about things that I think that they can do differently in their builds to help improve their post-contest sim ROIs and ultimately help them to build and enter stronger lineups into their contests. So we do this show twice a week. We typically do it on Mondays and Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern. Schedule can fluctuate a little bit, but I will always let people know well in advance. And if you ever want to get signed up, all you need to do is drop your DK username in the office hours channel in Discord. Let me know what sport and slate you want me to review, and I will add you to the list for the next show. But with that said, we do have a full cast of people to get through today. So it should be a fun one. And first up is going to be John, and we are going to be doing some NHL review from the weekend. So John asked to review Saturday's NHL main slate. So let's go back to Saturday. Let's go to NHL. On DK, we have this 9-game main slate. And let's pull this up. So we're going to start in the contest tab as we always do. All right. So what do we see here? So playing some like mass multi-entry type stuff. One thing I would recommend is, and I don't know if this is true or not, right? But if you have access to lower stakes contests, I would definitely start with those, right? You should always kind of take like this ground up approach to entering contests, right? So like the way that I always sort the lobbies, right, is from lowest entry fee to highest. And that's typically because, especially like on DK, right, you're not going to have access to those lower stakes contests forever. And the second thing is that I've heard top players say this, they say like, hey, when I had access to lower stakes contests, I had ROIs in like the 30%. Now that I only have access to the contests that are above $3 in the lobby, my ROIs are closer to like 10%. So there is significant edge because the best players in the lobbies cannot play those contests. Now, I don't even know if you have access to them, but if you do, I would recommend checking them out. And then something else I would always also check out here is going to be our DFS profit plan, which is our contest selection framework. It goes a little bit more in depth into this stuff and just gives you a better framework for what type of contest to enter, how you should be entering them. So on our YouTube channel, check out this video. Popular videos, the DFS profit plan, start winning more with the DFS profit plan. This is a great video to watch. I'll drop it here in the YouTube chat for anybody who wants to watch it. And it just gives you some ideas about finding a balance between single entries, 3 maxes, 20 max, 150 maxes, how much of your bankroll you should be allocating per slate, how to divvy that up. And I think that contest selection and bankroll management, there's a saying, right? You can be the 10th best poker player in the world, but if you're sitting at the table with the other 9, you are now the worst player in the game, right? And you always want to find contests where there are worse lineups than the lineups you're playing, right? Or else, if everybody's lineups are good, then you just lose to the rake over time, right? You lose to the 15% rake, and we don't want that either, right? So contest selection going to be super important. I think that one change can go a really long way here. But as far as your actual lineups, let's jump into one of these and look how they're doing. So we'll take the biggest contest on the day, and we'll go over to users. All right, so this is you, Mountain Lion. So enter 105 entries. So we'll put in people who are maxing this contest. Going to be a smaller group. Sort by sim ROI. So what do we see, right? So there's not a huge sample here, right? Because there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people maxing this contest, right? And it looks like you're like smack dab in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You are the 6th player in the list. So middle of the pack here, 5% sim ROI. Now, the highest sim ROIs, right, are like in this 20% range. So the biggest question to me, right, is like, okay, what decisions are the people who are maxing this out and achieving high sim ROIs making that you're not making, right? And what do those look like? something encouraging, I would say, is that your sim 99th profit is similar to the others in the contest, right? So that's a really good thing, right? The sim 99% profit is what you achieved in the top 1% of your sim outcome. So we're simming this contest 100,000 times. So if we ordered them by the most money you won to the least, the top 1% outcomes, your top 1% outcome is about 19K here, which is like basically first place. And that is right in line with a lot of the other people. Now, what you can expect on average, right? And notice this even for the top sim ROIers as opposed to the bottom, right? Your sim median profit. This is the most likely outcome for you. The 50th percentile, the right in the middle. Everybody basically loses because cashing percentage, right, is about 20%. So, having a down day here is fairly normal, right? We were talking about this on office hours, saying that even a player expected to win is going to lose more days in a calendar month than they're going to win, right? You can expect to profit like 6 to 8 days in a calendar month. So this isn't too bad. Where I would probably spend some time is getting to this point and then saying, okay, I'm going to look at your lineups, right? Because I don't know what decisions you made. So then, okay, I click the plus magnifying glass on you. I go to projections. And then I'm going to reset these to default. I would say, okay, in terms of ownership, right? So what I could do here, right, is I could do a couple different things. I could like write these down. I could take a quick screenshot and like look at these names, exposures, actual own, right? So like do a couple things, right? One, look at how you handled the highest owned players on the slate, and then look at what players you were more exposed to than the field or your highest exposures. And then, once you've written these down, once you have this information, go and look at the top sim ROIers, right? And see what they did or how they're different from you. And then go and compare their decisions at the top range to your decisions at the top range. And one thing I noticed here, right, is that top sim ROI or BBMon was low on Tavares, and so were you, right? So I was like, one thing I changed, I saw. But you could also look at like, hey, what lines were they on, right? What teams did they stack? What kind of stacks did they run? Oh, is it okay to run 5 stacks in NHL? Well, according to this, yes, top sim ROI or maxing out this contest, that means he's probably pretty sharp, is playing plenty of 5-2 stacks, right? As their most exposed stack. Like, oh, I thought you only wanted to play a 4-3-1, right? So you can get ideas by studying other top players in the contest, right? And I think that is totally a fine thing to do. To take it a step further, right? You can look at like SaberSim versus other providers, right? Like I know Aaron Costa does not use SaberSim, right? Has a stochastic logo. Like, hey, they're still grading out well in our sims, right? So, what do they do, right? Coming from a traditional optimizer. And you can look at, Kevin Robb, BBMon, both SaberSim users, stochastic, right? Like you can look at all these different people and see what they're doing. So I think there's a lot of different ways to go about this, but this is definitely where I would be spending time each and every day, right? Like every single day that I load up to get ready to play the next slate, I would spend time reviewing yesterday before doing that because the decisions and concepts from yesterday are going to be fresh in my head still. And I can say, hey, how did so-and-so handle da, 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 da? And then I could, have a better sense of what's going on there. So that's what I would be doing here. And John here, who we're studying, did ask a question that I do want to get in the chat here. So I told John I would talk about this on today's show. So let me find it real quick. And John asked, okay, is this question here? My question stems from SaberSim, at least in the last few slates, has a much lower exposure to the chalk than the field. Last night, it was Nylander. Thursday, it was Jack Hughes. I was severely underexposed in both scenarios. Is the system intentionally doing this because the long-term ROI avoiding high ownership is advantageous because of how top-heavy the contests are? So what I'll say, in regards to this is that SaberSim is not going to fade the chalk simply to fade the chalk, right? What this comes down to is that hockey is really close to like baseball in terms of player variance. Player variance is fairly high in hockey, right? And you can see this by pulling up a player's range of outcomes, right? So like this is Nylander, who we were talking about, right? Average projection 15.98. If you go and look at his 50th percentile, which is his median, it's 14.3. So why is there a disparity between these two? Well, it's because he is not normally distributed, which is like this nice bell-shaped curve. This is like more closer to like a right skew data set where that are pulling the mean to the right, even though those outcomes are happening way less often, right? So here, the majority of his lineups, are the majority of his outcomes are actually well below the mean. It's more than 50%, right? Because 50% is 14.3. So it's probably closer to like 55% are below this number, right? So what the builder does is it understands, hey, this is the player's range of outcomes. And then it looks at their projected ownership for the slate. And then it says, hey, based on our range of outcomes and based on the player's ownership, we think this play is risky, right? And we're judging that based on this adjusted ownership column. When adjusted ownership is higher than the player's actual ownership, that tells you that this player is high variance, right? So when Nylander's adjusted ownership is 30 and his contest ownership is 23, that 7-point difference in between, the builder is saying, hey, this player is actually really high variance and we need to be careful with how much we roster them. Now, if these numbers were the same or if it was lower, right, then they would probably be a better play. So like, for instance, here, it looks like, okay, what I could do here is I could lower his ownership, right? Let's say I lowered it to 10%. Well, when I lower it to 10%, his adjusted ownership changes too. So now the numbers are like 1% different, right? So like what that would mean is if the builder's saying, hey, if this guy is 10% owned, then yeah, he's like a really good play. And, you should be fine putting him in lineups. But when the player is 23% owned, now the builder starts to feel a little bit differently about this play because the rate at which they're achieving this outcome isn't high enough to warrant that level of ownership, right? So typically those type of plays you're going to end up less exposed to, I think, just in general. But I just want to be clear that it is not fading them just for the sake of fading them. It comes down to the player's range of outcomes. And, if this were like NBA or something, right? Those players are a lot more normally distributed, a lot more likely to achieve their average outcome. Then you're going to see the builder playing more of the chalk and not getting away from it. But it's for those reasons. So I wanted to cover that. All right. So from there, let's jump into a build. And it looks like this second build has the lineups closest to lock time. All right. So what do we see? Looks like we see default min-max salary. You might even lower minimum salary. I almost feel like it should be higher. Let's go check this second build. No, that is default. My bad. Okay, default minimax salary, no filters, no rules, no lineup filters, using ROI. Let's see. No minimax exposures in the all tab. None in the individual positions either. None in stack exposure. None in team stack. So overall, like a pretty hands-off approach here. That is totally okay, right? Um, is just you need to understand the differences here between direct fill and autofill, right? Direct fill, if you're using it this way and you have, all three contests selected in this drop down, what it's doing is it's averaging the ROIs across all three contest sims. So you can see under a lineup, let me close this, that there is average of selected contests, and then there are a list of the contests you played. Well, notice, right, that the ROI differences between these three is actually pretty drastic, right? One is 30%, one is 111, one is 171. It averages out to 104% sim ROI. Well, that's not super indicative. So if you want the best lineups going into if you want the best lineups for a contest going into that contest, then I would recommend one of two things: switching to autofill. And if you're going to use autofill, I would sort by prize pool. By going into this list, unchecking all the contests, and then checking one, going out of it, letting this resort the lineups, saving, unchecking that contest, going to the next, letting it update, saving again, which this is what autofill is doing, but this direct fill gives you the ability to view the lineups, see the exposures before putting them into the contest, etc. Autofill, you save it and then you view it after, right? So there's some differences there. But I would be trying to be more contest specific here as to which lineups are going into which contest, as opposed to a set of lineups that grade out well across all three going into your lineups, right? So that would be my biggest change here. So to recap, check out the profit plan video, mix up the contest selection a little bit. Number 2 is study other maxers in the contest, see what decisions they're making compared to the decisions you're making and their lineup and stat characteristics. Number 3 is consider using the direct fill contest by contest approach or using autofill to get more specificity from the contest sims being used here. But those are my biggest suggestions here. So give those a shot. Another good way to learn how to study lineups is to go into Saber School, go into Saber Sim 101. A ton as well. All right. Long one there to get the day started. John and I have been going back and forth a little bit since the weekend, so wanted to get him a good, solid review. Really quickly, Brandon said, review my builds. If you want to get signed up, Brandon, all you got to do, drop your DK username in the office hours channel. Let me know what sport and slate you want me to review. There is a little bit of legwork I have to do before the show to get the people set up to be reviewed on the show. So I can't add people on the fly, unfortunately. But if you give me that info that I need, I will add you to the list for the next show, which will be on Friday. All right. Next person up. That was NHL was fun, always fun. And we are going to be jumping over to NFL here. And we are going to be reviewing Music Guy for the Sunday Night Football Showdown last night. So let's get him up on the screen and let's jump over to the NFL Showdown, which was Detroit and Houston. And let's get this up on the screen. All right. Build is loading now. We're going to start in the contest tab as always. So really, really good contest selection here. Now let's go into one of these and see what it looks like. So let's do the mini max. Shouldn't be a problem here. Let this load. All right. Contest is loaded. Go over to users. So enter 150 lineups. We'll set entries equal to 150. Sort by sim ROI. All right. So good news here, right? Positive 10% sim ROI. Looks like this set of lineups is not very far off from the top. So that's really encouraging, right? Now let's see, what we can do to improve this set of lineups, right? And I always do this by trying to find a user with some similar metric, right? So for instance here, Music Guy, 29 average dupes, 87.66 sim average score, 10% sim ROI. And Mahoney told me I'm freezing a little bad. Yeah, sometimes the build review show, pulling up the other builds is a little intensive on my CPU. So I will tend to freeze on this show a little bit more than like office hours. I apologize about that. It's just like a memory thing. But if it gets so bad, let me know. I know I can see it freezing a little bit right now, on and off. But I think we're good here at the moment. There is one thing I could try real quick, hoping to free up some memory. So, but aside from that, that's the best I got. All right. So where was I? So I was talking about comparing his characteristics to somebody with a higher sim ROI, right? So 10% sim ROI, 29 average dupes, 87.66 sim average score. Basically what I want to do is I want to go and find somebody with a higher sim ROI who has a similar value for dupes or sim average score, and then figure out what the difference is, right? So here, I don't really see anybody around like the 29 mark for dupes, but I do see somebody with a similar sim average score, right? So Music Guy sim average score 87.66. This other person here, Sacrilegious, 87.38 sim average score. So pretty close, within 0.3. Now the difference here, right, is that Sacrilegious has a 12 average dupes and Music Guy has a 29, right? This is the biggest difference that I see. So basically what I'm learning here, right? It is okay to play a sim average score of in the 87 range. But if you're going to sacrifice projection, because some of these other sets have higher projections, you need to be lower duped, right? So like this other person, the top sim ROI or 91 sim average score, 52 dupes, right? So like it's okay to play lineups that are on average dupe 52 times if your sim average score is so high, and we're using, that as like a proxy of like how often they're winning, I guess. So there's a balance to be had here, right? In order to get to, the top of this leaderboard, right? The top of these sim ROI, we need to have lineups duped slightly less is the biggest takeaway here. Or we need to have lineups higher projected, right? One of those two options will be fine. But that's the biggest thing I see here. So let's go into a build. So this is the build they used. So takeaways here. 0 min salary, 5K lineups, 1 rule. What does this rule say? If exactly 3, then use at least 2. So this is a pretty interesting rule. It's pretty big. It looks like it's all players from Detroit. So there was some idea behind like stacking Detroit players together. I don't know where this came from. Doesn't seem like it had a big effect on the post-contest sim ROI, so I think it's fine. Mahoney said, if using all 3, Goff, Montgomery, Gibbs, make it a 5-1 stack. Oh, okay. So they're basically trying to like say like, hey, if I'm taking, 3 big name players from Detroit, I want like an onslaught type of stack. which is fine, right? It doesn't seem like this had a big impact on post-contest sim ROIs, so I think it's totally okay to do something like that. And it looks like they did write the rule right. They had all the flexes, all the captains for those 3 players, and then they said, then they had all the other players listed, so it seemed fine. Let's see. No, or just a very few minimax exposures. So 1 for Montgomery, 1 to cap Amon-Ra, 1 to cap Tank Dell, and then they ruled Tim Patrick out. I think this is fine. It's okay to be a little opinionated here. None in the flex, so just a couple in the captain. Otherwise, no major changes there. They are capping stack exposures, so capping 4 2s, capping 3 3s. I've seen this and even suggested it, right? At times, like if you run a cash build and you see like, hey, the field's mostly playing even stacks and really staying away from 5-1s, and then you come in here and you see like, hey, 5-1s have a pool percentage, which is like their proxy like optimal rate at like 16%. Maybe I want to, jam 5-1s and try and get different from the field. So I don't see anything wrong with the decisions being made here, and the sim ROIs would agree, right? Now, the only thing I'm not seeing is any sort of action to account for duplication, right? I'm not seeing it anywhere. I don't see lineup filters. I don't see rules. There's nothing I can see. They're not changing the max salary, right? That's another way of doing it. The stack exposures could potentially be a way of doing that, right? Like, hey, if the field's mostly on 3 3s, even stacks, I want to play more 5-1s. That is a consideration for duplication, right? Playing stack constructions, the field is less likely to play. So I will say that. But what I would like to see is probably something here that you're doing to directly account for duplication. So typically, like, salary used is correlated to lineups being duplicated. The more salary you leave on the table, the less likely you are to be duped, right? So that could be capping max exposure before the build. Max salary before the build. What I recommend using is geometric mean, lineup filter, or lineup rule if you're like on starter, right? So in Saber Sim, you can go to the top right, you can go to help. And then in our tutorials, if you type geometric, you can find this video, how do ownership product and ownership geometric mean work. This is a great video for explaining product ownership versus sum ownership and how to apply that in Saber Sim. Just dropped it in the YouTube chat. I would check that out, right? That is going to be one of the best ways to account for duplication in your process, and start including that, right? So it starts off with a custom metric for GeoMean, which you could do by adding right here, and then going to my own product GeoMean value, where it calculates the value of each lineup's geometric mean, and then you could filter from there. So that'll be step 1. The video will walk you through how to do that. But all in all, really good set of lineups, good sim ROI towards the top of your contest, very good contest selection. I think if we could account for duplication at some point in this process, just adding that as a step, then it would be exactly what you need to climb those rankings. So good stuff, Mahoney. Appreciate you tuning in live and providing some additional context there. And I hope that this review was useful for you. All right. So that's exactly what I was looking for. Thanks, Andrew. You're welcome, man. Appreciate you. All right. So next up on the list here is going to be Lover T, and we're going to be reviewing the same slate, actually. Cool. So we're going to get him up on screen, and then we're going to go back to Sunday Night Football. So, and looks like we have one more Sunday Night Footballer as well. So we'll probably stick with all the Sunday Night Football stuff. That way we compare users to each other, right? Especially if they played the same contest. It's always a fun thing to do. And then we'll move on. We have a NFL Sunday main slate review as well. All right, my three dogs is here. They are the next up. Right on. All right, so let's get Saberson back up, and let's jump into this review. So, going to start in the contest tab. All right, so contest selection looks very, very good here. Like what I'm seeing, nice balance here. Now we're going to jump into the mini max. Notice they entered less than the max. Totally okay thing to do, right? We talk about that all the time. So it is definitely okay to enter less than the max. Let's pull up these results. And great news is, right, that Mahoney also played this contest, and we can compare directly to another Saberson user. Change it to greater than or equal to. And chances are there aren't that many people who entered exactly that many lineups, right? So greater than or equal to will give you more people to compare against. So sort by sim ROI. All right. So before we said, top sim ROIers, we're in like the top 20% sim ROI. Lover T here, negative 22%. Apologies about the show pausing. It always happens when I pull up these contest results. It's just so much information here that, it's 118,000 lineups. It just gets pretty intensive, but going to do the best we can. So big difference, right, from the last person that we reviewed, going from positive 10% to negative 22. Now, T here said like, hey, I'm pretty new to Saberson, right? Okay, that's totally cool, right? I mean, that's what the show's for. We're going to figure out, hey, how can we get, you on the right track to get you pointed in the right direction, right? So comparing what we saw before to what we see now, right? So good news here is our average dupes are down, 10 average dupes, right? Now, the problem is, in order to get to 10 average dupes, they had to sacrifice too much projection, right? Last person, 87%, 87 sim average score. T here is down at 83, right? So they got the lower dupes, but they sacrificed too much projection to get there. But that's okay, right? That's a solvable problem. So biggest thing here, right, is probably sacrificing too much sim average score, sacrifice a lot of salary as well. We do say those two things are correlated. So let's go into their build and see what kind of decisions they made that we could probably, change a little bit to get to this a similar outcome, but a little bit better, right? All right. So 0 min salary. First and foremost, right? They're chopping off the top 1,000 salary, right? This is one thing we talked about. So they're saying, hey, I don't want to play any lineup above 49K salary, and I'm going to use this to get unique on the slate. Now, this is definitely one approach, right? Is chopping this off, playing lower salary lineups. Now, it seems like the effect it had ended up hurting you more than helping you, at least initially, right? So let's continue, and we'll come to our like final opinion, right? Let's look at this. It looks like they used direct fill here. There's one thing I'll note. No min or max exposures in the all tab. No min or max in the flex. Some minor projection adjustments. Nothing that had a huge impact, right? They did make some like big changes, like Khalif Raymond, 2.39 to 5 is like double, but that still only led to like 7% exposure. So, or 31% entry exposure, kind of a lot, right? To take a 3% owned player and get them in like 30% of your lineups. So I think, in general, I would say projection adjustments should be somewhere between like maybe 10% or maybe 1 to 2 points if like they're higher projected, or like half a point to 1 point if they're like lower projected. Like if you wanted to target Khalif Raymond a little bit, I would have rather seen like a half to 1 point adjustment. We see 7% exposure, but then we look at entry exposure, right? We see 31%. That is a lot, right? That is like 10x his flex ownership here. So that one thing is like a little concerning. So I would say lower the projection adjustment here. Like, so I like that adjustment a lot better. A lot of these other ones look okay. Stover might be a little bit high too, but the impact isn't as big. Seems like he's only like 2x his ownership. So that doesn't seem so bad. Aside from that, right? I think what could probably help here. So I think the salary angle is okay. So first and foremost, I think it's okay because there's more than one path to victory, right? You can go with the max salary cap approach. You can go with geo mean. You can go with lineup construction. There's a bunch of different things you can combine them, right? So there's no right answer. There's no one right answer. Now, based off what we've seen, right? You got to figure out, okay, well, if I want to take the salary approach and I'm coming in too low projected, how can I counterbalance that, right? You got to think about, I'm trying to strike a balance between duplication and win probability, right? I want lineups that have a good chance of winning, but when they do win, I want to get a lot of the first place prize. I don't want to win and chop it with 300 people, right? So I want to strike a balance. That's really important to think about. So here you're getting the unique effect, but we're not getting the balance, right? So we got to add that. Now, how can you add that, right? For me, what I would probably recommend is one of two things, which I'm not sure which one is better, but a good idea, right, would be maybe to test both. Because like for instance, there's a showdown tonight. Enter 220 maxes, do the dime time in the quarter jukebox, and do one approach in one and do one approach in the other. So the two I would recommend. Use a high minimum salary. Try an approach where you have 44K min salary, right? Where you bring that way up. That way you're not getting even lower salary lineups because you're already sacrificing so much, right? So that's one idea, right? Create a tighter salary band where you're sacrificing max, but you're not sacrificing too much min. The other approach would be to leave the min salary at 0 and go and do a lineup filter for average projection, where maybe you trash the bottom 10 to 20% of projected lineups. So I would come in here, I would say show lineups with projection greater than X, and then you would just keep changing this number until 500 to 1,000 lineups go in the trash. This is going to be another way of counterbalancing the effect of the uniqueness and of the loss in salary, right? And another good thing to do would probably be to add an average projection aggregate metric. If you want to leave these, it's fine. If you don't care for them, you can get rid of them. Just come in here, add average projection. And then, so for instance, right now we're at 81.96 average projection. What if I go and do that projection filter, right? Projection greater than, and I don't know, we'll say, 65. Okay, that's only a few lineups. Let's go to like 70. Let's go 75. Okay, so 81 looks like a good number, right? We get to 81. We have 580 lineups in the trash. Our average projection has come up like 4 points here, right? So average projection is 85.4 with the filter on. With the filter off, oh, it's like 84 now. I thought it was at 81. Maybe I was wrong, but either way, it did come up about a point, right? I think, or it had some effect, right? Overall, so this would be another way of potentially trying to counter. So after tonight's contest, tomorrow, once the post contest sims have run, go and look at your results in both of those and see which one did better, and then maybe you could pick one, right? So that would be what I would recommend for this one. But hope that helps. Apologies about the freezing. There's just a lot going on with all these lineups. So, anyways, gonna keep it rolling. That was our second Sunday Night Football Showdown review, and we have one more here for Sunday Night Football. So this one's going to be Sammy, and he said, helpful. Thanks, man. I'll keep tinkering for sure. Glad. Hope that helps a ton. Now we got Sammy up, same slate. Hopefully, you play the same contest. I don't know. Usually, Sammy plays Diamond Quarter, but that's exactly what I was talking about, right? Like Sammy's somebody who's testing out a bunch of different ideas and trying to find a strategy that works for them, and they're trying it in those lower dollar 20 maxes where they can try a couple different approaches. So, good example there. All right, bringing Sammy up, getting the contest tab up. Played the dime time, right? So I'm going to pull up the results here. All right, lineups did load. Go to users, 20 lineups, sim ROI. Hey, so this is really good, right? Sammy's somebody who's kind of bounced around in the sim ROI standings, like kind of up and down, up and down. And here, the 33% sim ROI, highest sim ROIs in the contest, like 45% and up. So really close to the top here. So really like this. 8 average dupes, 87 sim average score. I don't see anybody like directly close to this. Okay, so 7 average dupes is the next closest I see, 88.2. So slightly higher projected, but not too far off here. So I think this is good. Sammy's lineups look solid. I'd be really happy if I opened it up and saw this sim ROI is basically what I'm saying. So how did they approach it, right? So see, this is interesting, right? This is exactly one of the approaches that we talked about. If you're gonna lower the max salary, then you have to counterbalance it, right? So they counterbalance it with a fairly high minimum. They left the minimum. I think the defaults are like 45 to 50K. So they left the 45K. So first note there, right? Leaves the 45K min, just drops max. And they didn't drop to 49,000. They dropped to 49.6. Another consideration. This is just a hide remove player, so you don't see them. Okay, so we see a projection sum rule, right? We see an aggregate rule. My projection sum at least X. This will guarantee that every lineup in your pool is above that threshold. I think that's a fine approach. We see an ownership rule. My own sum no more than X. Okay, this is another good one, right? They're trying to account for duplication with this sum ownership rule. And then this filter probably isn't doing anything because we have the rule here, right? So the projection sum rule says projection must be greater than 84.42. So having a projection filter of 84, every lineup in the pool should be above that number basically already. So probably don't need to double count. I do like the ROI greater than 0 filter here, so that's good. But I think these two aggregate rules are really strong, and they counterbalance and go with the min and max salary adjustments here. So good stuff there. No min or max in the captain. No min or max in the flex. Other than that, pretty hands off. So this is a really good set of lineups. Sammy, I think you're onto something here. I know you've been tinkering around a lot with a bunch of different approaches. I really like this one. I think it hits on all the key things that you need to do. So I would highly recommend continuing with this strategy. So good job, Sammy. Sammy's been at it for weeks trying to find a process that they're comfortable with. So that's the end of our Sunday night football showdown reviews here. And we have one more today. And this one is going to be Sunday main slate. So this one's going to be Jim. We'll get Sunday's main up. Sammy is here. Said appreciate it. All right. So NFL main slate Sunday. DK going to jump over the contest tab. This one's going to be Jim. Contest selection, really good, right? I like this a lot. Nice, solid balance. Single entry in 3 max. Entering less than the max and the mini max, totally cool. Couple shots in the Millie Maker. I'm fine with it. I think it's cool, right? Can't win it if you don't play. And it even looks like you had some decent lineups there, right? So that's great. All right. So as far as what we're going to review here, I'm going to pull up the quarter jukebox, a little bit smaller than the mini max, which and we're just waiting for these results to load up. All right, so let's go over to users. Got Jim here, 20 lineups, sort by sim ROI. All right, so good news. Jim is 56% positive sim ROI in this contest. That's great. Highest sim ROIs are like in the 100 range. So there is some room for improvement, right? So what do we see about Jim's set that's different, right? Well, his average salary pretty in line with all the top sets. Uniqueness, possibly even more unique than some of these top sets here. Average dupes of 1, average dupes of 3. Somebody probably ran a train here. Now, the biggest difference I see, right, is their sim average score is 133.5. Some of these other sets like 137, 136, 141, 138. So sacrificing maybe like 3 too many points in average projection here, which would probably boost their ROI to like the top of this list. So pretty solvable problem here. Now, good thing is that we do see a swap. I love seeing when users are swapping. Really important note there. Looks like they ran a couple different builds. This build 3 is I'm going to assume their lineups came from build 3 here. So let's go in here and see what their set looks like. Okay, so what do we see? So I'm pretty sure they bumped the minimum salary. I think it's 48.5, so bumped it to 49. That's cool. Using default, don't use players against opposing D. Using autofill, ROI, unique rank, right? So unique lineups. ROI greater than 0, check. Filtering out some lowly projected lineups, check. So all things we talk about regularly. So this all looks good so far. So 1 max exposure in the all tab, nothing else really. Nothing in quarterback. Nothing in running back, wide receiver, tight end, flex, defense, stack exposure, game stacks. I don't see any other min max exposure. I see one single one, which is a little surprising to me why their lineups are so low projected. I wonder what is the min uniques here. So the only thing that I can think of that could possibly be tanking the sim average score is possibly the uniques here, right? So I don't know how they settled on 3, but it could be that 3 brought them down too far. So I would just be careful with this, right? And the other thing here is I don't remember how these were sorted. I always recommend sorting by prize pool. But the 25-cent quarter jukebox is a little bit lower, right? They're using unique rank. A lineup will only be used once and then get removed from the pool. So there are a number of contests above this. There's probably like 70 plus entries prior to that contest being filled that we reviewed. So it's possible that some higher projected lineups went into these other contests. That's another consideration, right? But all in all, I really like everything I'm seeing in this build. The 56% sim ROI is very good. Jim said I increased London and Stevenson projections a lot. So that could be something to consider, right? Always remember if you're using custom projections or making projection adjustments, that the post-contest sim is always going to use Saber Sims projections, their baseline. So there could be some differences if your projections are different, if you're aggregating, if you're using other outside projection sources. So always take those results with a little bit of a grain of salt if doing that. That's another consideration. But I think when I factor in everything you've done here, I would say this is a good process. And I really like everything I'm seeing here. So I would say keep it up. I would say good job and stick with it. So this looks really good to me. But all right, that was our last review for today. Appreciate you guys tuning in and bearing with me here. I do really appreciate it. And this was our build review show for Monday. I will be back on Friday. If anybody wants to get signed up throughout this week, drop your DK username in the Office Hours channel. Let me know what sport and slate you want me to review, and I will add you to the list. So appreciate you guys. Until then, take care. Thanks. Bye.